back to the Midlands Network of Popular Culture. I hope you had a lovely lunch break. And today we're going to kick off our afternoon talk with Lisa Fletcher. She is Head of Humanities and Professor of English at the University of Tasmania, and her books include historical romance fiction, heterosexuality and performativity, and popular fiction and spatiality, reading genre settings, and with Ralph Crane, cave, nature and culture, and island genres, genre islands. She's currently co-writing circulating bestsellers, The Geography of the Book Market, with Elizabeth Leanne, I hope I pronounced that right.
Lean.
And now I'm going to pass over to Lisa so she can tell you all about her current work.
Great, thank you very much, Lucy. I'm just going to share my screen so that I can start my PowerPoint. Please work. There we go. Is that working, Lucy? Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, so I will start my paper. In late 2016, Amazon Technologies, Inc., a subsidiary of Amazon.com, lodged a United States patent for a dedicated network delivery system that would operate in part beneath the surface of the Earth and independent of any traditional transportation system. A network including subterranean tunnels for transporting parcels from origin to destination is just one of a series of fantastical patents from Amazon. Others propose Zeppelin warehouses and delivery drones, worker tracking wristbands, and an underwater storage facility that, according to one journalist, looks like something out of James Bond. The company's interest in building subterranean routes to move products from their fulfillment centres may seem less fantastical when we remember Donald Trump's 2018 Twitter attack on the firm and on founder Jeff Bezos for using the US Postal Service as their delivery boy. Launched in 1995 as Earth's biggest bookstore, Amazon now promises customers Earth's biggest selection of physical and digital products and services. Journalist Brad Stone refers to the present era as the age of Amazon, a branding of history that chimes with what Claire Lister calls our logistical era, and with pronouncements by Ted Strifus and others about the growing dominance of algorithmic culture. Stone explains that the idea for Amazon emerged from discussions between Bezos and David E. Shaw at the latter's company in the mid-1990s. They called it, he writes, the everything store. For Lister, Amazon is one of the main corporate players defining our connection. The expeditious flow of goods and information has emerged as a key priority for business and governments alike and fundamentally changed the geography of commerce. However, like Elon Musk's Hyperloop, a subterranean tube system for fast-speed travel between San Francisco and Los Angeles, Amazon's vision of an underground network delivery system is future-oriented and entirely familiar, even derivative. The delivery system patent is drenched in the overlapping tropes of science fiction and fantasy, adventure fiction and the thriller, and is a new chapter in the long political and commercial history of imagined and built subterranean delivery and transport enterprises. In today's paper, I consider one product launched and sold on Amazon.com, a best-selling science fiction series, Hugh Howey's Silo Saga. The aim of this paper is to begin tracing the links between the depth drive of Amazon's logistical and algorithmic efforts to serve the optimal number of customers and Silo's subterranean dystopia. In late 2017, Howey blogged euphorically about visiting Amazon's bricks and mortar bookstore in New York, where stock on display is determined by sales rank. What Amazon has done here, he wrote, is nothing short of brilliant. They've reduced the number of books available to the shopper. Amazon is going against the grain of their online bookstore, all while leveraging the big data mined from its online shoppers. Howey's casual vertical spatial metaphorics connects the retail ecosystem in which he has sold millions of books to the network of underground bunkers that are the setting for his chart-topping science fiction series, Silo. One comment on Howey's blog post draws an indirect link between the age of Amazon and the speculative project of the series. The reader writes, I have always put my money on Amazon over Google for world domination. Posts like this shore me up. But my question to the science fiction author is this: will the resulting world order be the world's first utopian society, or will there be subversion against the algorithms? I want to find better ways to bring together the close analysis of texts with examination of where and how those texts are produced and circulated. In today's paper, I've tried to attend both to both the textual meanings generated by the series and to the industrial workflows and marketing contexts that bring Howie's books to readers. This paper grows out of a book that I'm currently writing with Elizabeth Lean, Circulating Bestsellers, the Geography of the Book Market. Our focus is on the localities and the mobilities of best-selling novels as multi-format commercial and cultural objects. Before COVID-19, our research was already revealing the ways in which the fiction industry actively puts geography to work, both to move digital publications and print stock as quickly and widely as possible, and to frame reading bestsellers as an escape from economic, social, political, and geographical realities. We are now, like so many of us, thinking about how to adjust our research to consider the place of books in the present moment, and not only because our international fieldwork is no longer possible quite as we had planned. The book's wider objective, which this paper looks towards, is to shed light on the centrality of spatiality to the discursive effects and readerly pleasures of some of the most widely read books of our time. As Lean observes in her work on Antarctic set thrillers, the assumption that text and place are co-constitutive is increasingly recognised within cultural geography as well as spatial literary studies. Accordingly, the emphasis in most work published to date on the geographical significance of literature, including my own books, Island Genre, Genre Islands, and Popular Fiction and Spatiality, has been on the conceptualisation and representation of real and imagined places in and across texts. There has been surprisingly little work on the geography of publishing and of the book market. More broadly, the emergence and growth of the geo-humanities in the last decade has deepened our understandings of the ways in which, according to Sarah Luria, geography can help us understand literature and literature can help us understand geography. Nevertheless, unlike the history of the book, the geography of the book is still defining what it might become. And those of us interested in the places and movements of books and in how books present and produce geographies would do well to learn from studies of other cultural and commercial domains. I'm thinking here of studies such as Louise Crew's excellent The Geographies of Fashion, Consumption, Space and Value, which offer immediately transferable concepts and methodologies for thinking about the geography of literary culture. The set of questions that organise Crew's study of fashion geographies are readily adaptable to thinking about best-selling books. What are the key sites of consumption in the geography of bestsellers? How can we bring into view the, in her words, mutually constitutive relations between the production, sale, consumption, possession and space of or in books? Does literature, as Crew argues of fashion, play a role in actively spatialising the world? Or is this merely the self-justifying conceit of scholarship at the intersection of literary studies and geography? What kinds of case studies will best chart the connections and disconnections between the fictional worlds of bestsellers and the material worlds where they are found and through which they transit, whether as digital files or print volumes? If, from a geocritical perspective, books are both product and practice, object and agent, to borrow Crew's terms, how have these functions changed in a dramatically transformed fiction industry, and how are they continuing to change? Howie's series has provided a really fascinating starting point for our broader project, not least because exploring within and around its volumes confirms the prevalence of vertical ideas and models in how we think about best-selling fiction and how we think about the market for novels more broadly. Silo is an exemplary product of a new fiction industry. It was self-published on Amazon Kindle Direct, topped bestseller lists, and secured its author a print-only contract with a Big Five publisher. The series presents a page-turning tale about a catastrophic geopolitical experiment in an imagined future America. I started looking at this series in 2018 and, like all of my work on very recent fiction, wondered occasionally if the work would remain relevant. Just last month, however, Howie's publisher announced the release of a new box set edition, now renamed the Silo Saga. It was initially called the Wool Trilogy and then Silo and now Silo Saga, and with cover endorsements proclaiming it a new science fiction classic and a modern masterpiece. There's the new covers. Howie has said of the re-release, "When I wrote this series 10 years ago, I never thought they'd be as relevant as they are today." The main thing to know about the series, to grasp Howie's point about relevance, is that almost all of the action takes place underground in a post-disaster future. It depicts a world in enforced lockdown. Silo is fixated on the interpenetration of geography and politics. Appreciating this interpenetration requires approaching it both as a text and as a product of the fiction industry. The connection between Silo's subterranean setting and its publishing history is flagged in reviews and news articles that tag it as an underground hit or an underground sensation. Howie started his climb up the bestseller list on the lowest rung, without the boost provided by the support of a trade publisher and without the customer base of an established author. The news discourse about Howie and other self-publishing chart toppers, to use Dietz's term, suggests that the long-established vertical logics of book cultures and markets are under strain in the new digital publishing landscape. But how do the vertical and other spatial metaphors that organise thinking about book publishing relate to the metaphorical and material relations that, as Stephen Graham has shown us, saturate contemporary culture? One of the things this paper does is attempt to add book culture to the scholarly conversation about the proliferating verticalities of our world. Specifically, it looks to popular or genre fiction, which plays a central role as a driver of change in the contemporary publishing industry. My approach to popular fiction is anchored in a multi-layered conceptualisation of popular genres as textual, social and industrial formations. And this is work that I've done most extensively with Beth Driscoll and Kim Wilkins. We have recently finished our monograph, Genre Worlds, Popular Fiction in the 21st Century, which I hope we will see out soon, in which Howie features very briefly. This layered approach to popular fiction also informs the book series on 21st Century Booksellers that we're co-editing for Cambridge University Press. The social and industrial logics and practices of the production, distribution and reception of the Silo saga are, I think, inseparable from its imagined subterranean geopolitics. Central to my thinking on this point is the importance of Amazon in bringing Silo to its massive audience. As Simone Murray explains, in perhaps the digital literary sphere's most dramatic imperialising gesture, book retailer websites, principally industry behemoth Amazon, have attempted to dominate all phases of books' lives across all media. Born in Amazon books, such as the 9 volumes of Silo and their various triple-decker and omnibus editions, show that this imperialising gesture has thrown established ideas about the place of literature in the air, not least through their integrated e-publishing, e-reader and e-book platforms and devices. For example, Amazon's one-click tool, which enables instant purchase and delivery of books to e-readers, creates a logistical speed and reach that confounds assumptions of human pace or scale, effectively replacing values that have long dominated the book trade with a hierarchy of speed and immediacy. In its dominance of the digital book sphere, Amazon stands in stark contrast to bricks and mortar independent booksellers with limited stock that their staff hand sell, stock that can be easily digitised and whose supply chains can be disintermediated. One way to read Silo is as the result of Howie's recognition of the divide between the reluctant capitalists, to borrow Laura Miller's phrase, of the traditional book trade, and Amazon's blatant eagerness to sell as many books as they can as quickly as possible. In July 2011, Howie was working in a university bookstore in North Carolina, viewing the publishing world from one of its lowest rungs and writing in his spare time. Disappointed by a lack of interest of major publishers, he uploaded a short story, Wool, to Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing, or KDP, priced it at 99 cents and, in Mark McGurl's words, watched it catch fire. In response to reader demand, the original short story became the first instalment of a 5-part novel, Wool, which Howie serialised through KDP, releasing the final instalment in January 2012. In the same month, he released a single volume edition that was marketed at a discount price as an Amazon Kindle Daily deal. Wool became the most highly rated title on Amazon in 2012, with an average of 4.8 stars. By mid-2012, Howie was selling 20,000 to 30,000 books and earning around US $150,000 a month. A prequel, collectively titled Shift, was published in 3 parts in 2012 and 2013, and the series concluded with Dust in 2013. The 9-part series has since been repackaged as a trilogy that you can see on your screen: Wool, Shift and Dust. Over 500,000 copies of the first volume, Wool, had sold by the time Howie signed a print-only publishing contract with Simon & Schuster in 2013, retaining for himself the digital rights for the series. There's a few really key examples of this kind of hybrid career in contemporary publishing. The new editions, launched just a fortnight ago, are a chapter in the publishing history that I need to look at a little bit more closely. So the original short story, if you read nothing else of this series, read the original short story. It's really quite remarkable. The original short story imagines a future in which the world's entire population lives underground in a 144-floor cylindrical bunker. The inhabitants of the buried silo have no memory of life on the planet's surface, and they can move between levels only by walking up and down the single spiral staircase in the silo's centre. The brutal symbolism of humankind in an inescapable downward spiral does not compensate for the weak verisimilitude of the silo's architecture. By all reports, Howie only expected to use this setting for one short story, so he perhaps found himself stuck with a pretty clunky architecture for the fast-paced action demanded of his chosen genre. The citizens' only direct knowledge of the outside, called the outside, it's one of the really common words in the series, comes from digital video footage that is streamed live to cameras that are above them on the surface to massive screens that fill the walls of the silo's top floor. For the subterranean community of the series' opening tales of Wool, the silo is the world, and they are forbidden by law from showing any curiosity at all about, quote, the wonder of the ancient world beyond the projected veil of the wall screens. The short story focuses on the silo's sheriff, Holston, who is grieving the loss of his wife, Alison. 3 years earlier, Alison had demanded to go outside and was sentenced to cleaning, a bizarre death sentence that involves going to the surface in a hazard suit to wipe the camera lenses with wool pads. The suits only allow the cleaners enough time to remove the blur from the video projected below them and to walk a short distance towards the lifeless hills before a toxic wind kills them. Wool opens as Holston climbs to his own death, winding his way around and around the spiral staircase, compelled upwards by his own, quote, decision and determination to go outside. Howie has said that he had Plato's cave analogy in mind when he sat down to write Wool. If all we know of the world is fed to us through a single screen, he asks, whether that's TV, the internet, our newspapers, then how much do we know about the world, and who controls what we see and don't see, and are we brave enough to go out and search for the truth ourselves? The only alternative images of the world above ground that circulate in the silo are on the, quote, worn pages splashed green and blue, unquote, of illustrated children's books. Like the prisoners chained in Plato's cave, the silo's inhabitants know nothing beyond their subterranean world, and those who leave the silo to seek knowledge are condemned to death. In these terms, Howie taps into a long tradition of using cave-like settings as analogues for regimes of ignorance and unreality, as containers for buried secrets and forgotten dreams, and to signify the polar opposite of whole sight or true knowledge. The silo also evokes the contradictory metaphorics of subterranean spaces, especially in relation to life and death, refuge and imprisonment, the past and the future. Subterranean spaces can signify all of those things and sometimes at the same time. In these terms, Howie's silo exemplifies what John Beck calls the bunker's ambivalence. His summation of the bunker's ambivalent status also works as an accurate précis of the opening story of Silo and indeed of the series as a whole. Beck writes, while the bunker promises security and control in the form of refuge, it is also a sign of the deadly power that requires reinforced shelter. A bunker is both womb and tomb-like. For the creators and inhabitants of the silo in this series of novels, The silo represents both cradle and grave. Mark McGurl discusses Howie's series in his article, Everything and Less, Fiction in the Age of Amazon. I really like this article. I keep going back to it. He appraises the initial 58-page story as perfect, a resonant retelling of Plato's allegory of the cave that takes its place comfortably beside any of the canonical political parables of 20th century fiction, from Darkness at Noon to The Lottery. But McGurl rates the 1,500 epic pages of the expanded series as a disappointment. For McGurl, Howie's initial perfect idea evolved by customer demand from a sophisticated meditation on utopianism into, in McGurl's words, an epic of corporate populism of open-ended freedom. McGurl identifies Howie as representative of writers who, quote, act as unofficial spokespeople of the company from which they in effect rent virtual shelf space and automated marketing services. In McGurl's analysis, the context of the series publication explains what went wrong. How, he asks, could one possibly continue on from the chillingly perfect closure of the first story? If, however, success is measured by escalating reader demand and stratospheric sales, Howie's decision to continue writing beyond Holston and Allison's story is a no-brainer. McGurl is not explicitly interested in the vertical logics of the contemporary book market or of adjacent enterprises and cultures, but his argument does help to reveal them. He asks, should Amazon.com now be considered the driving force of American literary history? Is it occasioning a convergence of the state of the art of fiction writing with the state of the art of capitalism? If so, he continues, what does this say about the form and function of narrative fiction? About its role in symbolically managing, resisting, or perhaps simply escaping the dominant socio-political and economic realities of our time? For McGurl, Amazon is not just a large fact of contemporary literary culture and commodity culture more broadly, but is exemplary of the so-called new economy, an argument in a similar vein to those that cast Amazon as a protagonist in our still emerging logistical era or algorithmic culture or attention economy. The company's ambitions are, as well known, wrapped up in its name. After deciding against Cadabra.com and Relentless.com, Bezos poured through the A section of the dictionary and, according to Stone, had an epiphany when he reached the word Amazon, Earth's largest river, Earth's largest bookstore. As Stone tells the story, Bezos invited no feedback on the new name and registered the URL almost immediately, saying, this is not only the largest river in the world, it's many times larger than the next biggest river. It blows all other rivers away. So Amazon is aggressive, predatory, and algorithmic. But the company is also defined by traits that have their origins in its beginnings in the book trade. McGurl shows that critics of Amazon, quote, miss something important when they think of the company simply as anti-literary, as a mere numbers game, unquote. Specifically, the story of Amazon is shot through with traces of Bezos's commitment to literature and literary values. When he was on the brink of founding Earth's biggest bookstore, Bezos had just finished reading Kazuo Ishiguro's highly acclaimed novel, The Remains of the Day, about a butler who personifies the ethos of service. McGurl's virtuosic play with what this information might reveal has too many folds for me to explicate in this paper. But in short, he speculates that The Remains of the Day, in his words, is the novel that gave us Amazon. It's a quite extraordinary idea, really. The novel of which that whole sprawling enterprise is, in a sense, a reading. So for McGurl, reading Ishiguro's novel established for Bezos the principles that have guided Amazon's world-embracing project from the outset. Under the subheading Who We Are, the Amazon website tells us Amazon is guided by 4 principles: customer obsession rather than competitive focus, passion for invention, commitment to operational excellence, and long-term thinking. McGurl ties the company's mission to its literary roots, pointing to Bezos's observation in 2015 that, quote, we manage by 2 seemingly contradictory traits, impatience to deliver faster and a willingness to think long-term, unquote. McGurl concludes his essay with an intriguing personification of Amazon. If anything, the problem is that it wants to be a hero in a great literary work in its own right, real-time and long-term. That is exactly the formula for enduring literary value. If the literary text, transcending its mortal printed body, can now in theory live forever, for as long at least as humanity does, or its servers, that life will be meaningful only insofar as the work remains available as an object of experience, an occasion for the real-time enjoyment of virtual quality time, that is, for reading. So what might a literary work with Amazon as its hero, or indeed as its villain, look like? Howie has given us one way to answer this question with Silo, in which real-time and long-term are guiding threads that pull its sprawling narrative in different directions. On the one hand, the cliffhanger plotting and the readerly pleasures of Silo, published in fairly fast-paced instalment through KDP, manifests what Mogul calls the aspiration for serial plenitude over unpredictable singularity that drives the platform and underpins Amazon's broader investment in massive turnover and fast-paced commerce. On the other hand, with each subsequent volume, Howie's dystopia increasingly locates hope for the future of humanity in the endurability of codex books and of digital texts. As it turns out, the silo in which the series begins, in which that first story begins, is number 18 of a network of facilities, one of 50 bunkers, 49 of them identical, buried in Fulton County, Georgia, and connected by embedded conduits for exchanging power and information. The ancient and crumbling city, visible just over the horizon, is all that remains of Atlanta. Silo 1 is the controlling centre of this hub and spokes network. The all-male staff of Silo 1 are the only survivors of the world before 2052, when all surviving people were sent into these bunkers. Between shifts, the staff of Silo 1 sleep in vast warehouses of cryopods. When awake, they are drug-hazed, unable to remember the world before or their part in its violent end. Their jobs include processing the constant stream of data from the other silos and managing the cloud of weaponized nanomachines that maintains the perimeter of wasteland around and between the silos. The devastation projected on the screens of the silos' upper levels and the deadly atmosphere that kills every cleaner are not relics of a long ago disaster, but devices to keep the population underground and ignorant. The only human contact between the silos is between the true centres of power in each facility. The inner sanctum of the, and I think this is an odd anachronism in the series, the inner sanctum of the IT department on level 34 of each facility. The beginnings of the Silo project is the focus of Shift, the prequel to Wool. In 2052, a small group of powerful men implement a project to save humanity by destroying it. All that is left of the Earth's population and resources is sealed underground to be managed by a network of computer servers, menacing black boxes whose hisses, clicks and beeps provide the main soundtrack for the characters' adventures in this volume. The IT levels are the most sparsely populated of the silos. Around 24 workers exist in their own little kingdom using 35% of each silo's power. So all of the power, in a literal sense, is concentrated on this level. In effect, the world becomes coextensive with something like what Amazon calls a fulfillment centre. The everything store is no longer a dominant global logistic network with countless nodes, but the implicit setting for all human activity on the globe. The future world this series imagines is the consequence of a megalomaniacal attempt, didn't say that right, megalomaniac, forget it, attempt to enter international politics. There are no geographies of international relations when all human existence is reduced to a neighbourhood of deep holes in the ground. Shift reveals that the servers and their operations, as much as the silos themselves, are central to the vertical thinking that underpins Howie's world building. From the hyper-paranoid perspective of the Americans who built the silos, the only way to escape the airborne threats of the contemporary age is to seize complete control of the flow of air and everything it might carry or sustain, including data, disease, people, and drones. To save America, coterminous with the world in Silo, from death from above, they combine bunker mentality with what we might call data devotion, a faith in the power of computers to record and rank every aspect of human existence. As the series progresses, we learn that Howie's villains are possessed by a kind of algorithmic mania, trusting a bunch of precision machines with the control of humanity's fate. The black boxes hold the clue to why the engineers of the Silo project, like a committee of billionaire doomsday preppers, believe the future of humanity hinges on sealing insurance populations in underground bunkers until a day hundreds of years in the future, when a select group of survivors will be released to recolonise the surface. These black boxes enable a data regime that combines human and machine learning to profile and assess the populations through CCTV, biometric profiling, long-range genealogical records, and human and computer surveillance of individual and group behaviour and communication. Each silo is a pod of buried hope, but all but one will be destroyed at the project's end by lethal gas and an inbuilt collapse mechanism. So the algorithms run by the servers in Silo 1 maintain a ranked list of the other silos based on aggregated data of their populations. The silo in the top position at resettlement date will become the seed population for the new world. The Silo project's design and implementation resonate with what Bradley Garrett calls the resurrection temporality of the bunker. He writes, "A bunker built with no resurrection temporality, like a nuclear storage facility, is a sepulchre rather than a bunker." The allusion to the Holocaust in the revelation that most of the silos are intended as mass gas chambers and tombs intensifies as the series progresses, most clearly in the characterisation of Senator Thurman, one of the project's masterminds, and an overdrawn amalgam of 20th century dictators Walt Disney, President Snow from the Hunger Games, and Jeff Bezos. A key scene in which Thurman is pictured in Kramer's bookstore in Washington, D.C. in 2049 evokes Bezos. Browsing the stacks in the, quote, small corner of Kramer's that acted as the cafe's bookshop, unquote, he selects a heavy book from the towering shelves of old books. The leather-bound volume with a gold-embossed title on the cover has the, quote, dense heft of a law book, but the white space between lines of dialogue, unquote, shows it to be a novel. He remarks on the book's binding, still strong over 100 years since its printing, and selects it as a sample for the project he's working on, the project, of course, being the Silo project. The Survivor's Guide, that resettlement population's guide in this imagined future, will be a set of hard-bound books called The Legacy, each volume a replica of the book from Kramer's, interred, just in case you miss the metaphorics, in tin sarcophagi in the secret command centres of IT, to which only department heads and their apprentices have access. So in this series, print books come to emblematise the resurrection temporality that organises both the Silo project and the narrative arc of the entire series. The About page on Amazon's website proclaims, "Books are in our DNA at Amazon. It's where we started and it's core to who we are." This sentence would make persuasive copy for the Silo project's executive team, for whom print books are both cherished relics of Earth's history and the symbol of its future. Books and other forms of paper-based communication are weirdly central to life in Silo 18, the silo where we spend most of our time with characters. Children's books are read widely, printed records and reports circulate in manila folders and are stored in filing cabinets, and citizens communicate with handwritten notes and letters that are carried by the porters who spend their lives treading the rungs of that spiral staircase. Only the workers in Silo 1 appear to have access to novels, but even these are paperbacks with yellowed pages. The dream that literature can connect our past, our present and our future is perhaps best symbolised by the series heroine, who I haven't had much time to talk about in this paper, Juliet. Juliet comes from the lowest levels of Silo 18, the down deep, and is named for Shakespeare's play, a copy of which she treasures, quote, a tiny book of papers held fast with brass pins. In broad terms, the lexicon of this series and the world it depicts demonstrate the narrative efficiency and flexibility of the spatial metaphorics of verticality. Verticality provides the spatial logics of ranking that permeates discourses of merit, privilege and success in myriad and diverse contexts. Verticality is also key to the dominant models of hermeneutics, according to which meaning resides beneath the surface and according to which readers dig for the truth. The heavy symbolic load carried by books in this series is bolstered by the frequent use of the verb to dig, both to describe tunnelling through the earth and to characterise key characters' illicit research activities in digital and print archives. After generations underground, what is lost from collective memory and imagination is a capacity for bird's eye or panoramic views. The silo's physical architecture and governance keep the population inward-looking and largely incurious, a spatially contingent sensibility captured by the central image of the spiral staircase, quote, threading through the buried silo like a straw in a glass, unquote. The citizens of the silos are not readers or creators of fiction, and the implication throughout is that this explains their subservience. This explains their subservience to an algorithmic culture. The social and familial organisation of the underground community at the series' heart, Silo 18, is profoundly conservative. The architecture and management of the silo creates a crude social hierarchy or class ladder. The mayor and the sheriff occupy the upper top. People from the mids spend their lives aspiring to be toppers, and mechanics or greasers from the dark confines of the down deep perform the labour that keeps the lights on and the air breathable. Young girls are implanted with contraceptives until in a sanctioned heterosexual relationship, when they dream of winning the lottery that allows a couple 1 year to try for a baby. As it turns out, chance does not determine who wins this prize. It is granted to couples by data analysts in Silo 1. Human life in this new world is quite literally managed by algorithms, socio-technical functions that operate beneath the surface, replacing chance and choice with biased ranked outcomes. But the ominous servers are only tools in this experiment, scraping and sorting metadata and making decisions based on priorities set by the men in power. In this series, survival underground requires new technologies and old paradigms of human community. Another way to read a narrative in which Americans take refuge from airborne threats in a network of self-sufficient sealed bunkers, not least in a desert landscape, is as a perverse reversal of roles and locations in contemporary geopolitics. The urgency of the Silo project in Shift is explained in vague terms by its makers as a reaction to the threat of weaponised nanomachines. We hear about something, or read about something Iran is working on. In these terms, the series amplifies the 21st century concept of homeland security, claiming for a US populace 50 years hence the fear of instant unknowable death from the air that is keeping children permanently indoors in the Middle East. This reversal is achieved largely through Charlotte, a drone pilot who only just makes it back from the conflict in Iran to enter Silo 1 before the destruction of the surface, bringing with her bird's eye visions of faces looking to the sky. The images of faces raised to death from above is a recurring motif throughout the series, not least because in all but Silo 1, the dominant architectural feature is a spiral staircase that circles a central void for 144 floors. Charlotte is one of the first characters to glimpse the green and blue world beyond the cloud that surrounds the silos. She does so by stealing a drone from Silo 1 that she refits with cameras, repurposing hazard suits using supply from IT and using radio technology to communicate with rebels in other silos over a primitively reconstituted internet. So everything the people needed to return to the world above was in the silos all along. They just didn't have the imagination to see it. The fantastic conceit at the heart of this series parallels that which has driven Amazon's branding from its launch as Earth's biggest bookstore in 2007 to its reputation today as the everything store. The world's population can be served effectively by one entity. In Howie's imagined future, however, all new goods and services are produced, warehoused, delivered and consumed in a single logistical network. In the series' bleak future, not only is Earth synonymous with the United States, but all human life and industry takes place in purpose-built subterranean facilities in Fulton County, Georgia. For much of the series, it seems that the planet's surface is an uninhabitable wasteland, that life outside may be possible in the future is an unspoken deadly hope in every member of the silo. But in the final chapters, a small group of survivors cross the dead zone that surrounds the silos and discover a lush green world. When their leader, Juliet, reaches the top of the ramp that runs from the silo's airlock to ground level, a feeling of rightness overtakes her. The wrongness of the silos of the Silo project inheres in its founders' subterranean thinking in its broadest sense. The series plays on the everywhere and nowhere spatialisation of the age of Amazon, the distributed geographies of logistics age, and the simultaneously global and intimate reach of algorithms, and dramatises the surface depth dualisms that click their commercial and cultural enterprises together. When this series is read in concert with its history of publication, it becomes clear that Amazon is the very heart of how is creative entrepreneurship. This is evident both in the story of Silo's sensational climb to the top of Amazon's bestseller lists and in the story the series tells about a heroic band of characters trapped in deep cylindrical bunkers of concrete and rebar buried in the southeastern United States. In the Silo series, Howie offers us a future that takes the age of Amazon to its extreme. A corporate behemoth has achieved the ultimate aggressive takeover and monopolised the business of saving humanity. All of human life takes place within their highly efficient logistical network, and the network and its participants are constantly monitored, classified, and ranked by mysterious algorithms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That talk was really interesting. I think that kind of brings us to the end of our talk. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Midlands Popular Network of Culture and for giving such an interesting talk.
It's been my pleasure.
And if people want to follow your work or find you or talk to you, what's the best way they can do that?
I am extremely easy to find on the internet. They're more than welcome to shoot me an email. Very easy to find, like all academics.
Wonderful. And that is the end of our Lisa Fletcher talk. But if you stick around, we'll be back in 15 minutes with our panel on visual culture, looking particularly at games and how they have changed and transformed and all that jazz. So thank you so much and goodbye.